Do you see my computer? Do you see my screen?
No.
Oh, okay. So I have to share the screen. That's the problem. Okay, now I share it. Oh, okay. Now I got it. Okay, good. Okay, perfect. So you learning Lezech Nishmas Rabbi Yehuda Yidel ben Yaakov Yitzchak?
Yes, Yehuda Yidel ben Harav
Yaakov Yitzchak. So Zechusa Yagan Aleinu, and that's our learning should be for his neshama. Okay.
Amen.
All right, so we're beginning again over here in Daf Hey on Moed Katan, and here we go. We learned this. This is a pretty straightforward daf. We'll refer to pictures when needed. Okay, the bottom of the page. The Mishnah said, "U'mesaknin s." Top of Hey Amid Aleph. Kilkule hamayim sheb'rshus harabim. That means that if there's a drinking cistern in the Rishus Harabim, that's for the people. So then you're allowed to take out the stones, twigs that fell into that cistern because that's a drinking reservoir for people. So you're allowed to clean that out on Chol Moed. So the Gemara is medayek. Chatita en. You're allowed to clean out this cistern. Yes. Chafira, but to dig a new cistern on behalf of the Rabbim, of the half loy, you're not allowed to. So that digging a new one, you're not allowed to. So Amar Rabbi Yankov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, loy shanu, that was not taught. Ela she'ein Rabbim tzrichin lahem. If they don't need it necessarily, if they can get it along fine with what they have, then you're not allowed to dig a new one, even if it benefits the public. Aval Rabim tzrichin lahem. But if it's a public need for right now, that means if you're not going to dig a brand new cistern for water right now, it's going to inconvenience everybody. They're going to have to go far away to bring drinking water. Then afila chafira mutter, even digging a brand new cistern on Chol Moed is permitted because it's for the public. So the Gemara says a question. And the Gemara is going to remain by this, but the Gemara is going to go off over a little bit. The Gemara is going to try to challenge it. If many people need this new well, this new cistern, is it permitted to dig it? Well, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, and this brisa is brisa number 1. You're allowed to clean out the pits, the cisterns, or the caves of belonging to an individual. Let's say a person has a private water source. He's allowed to clean it out on Yom Tiv. You don't have to tell me, Shal Rabin, that if it belongs to the public, certainly you're allowed to clean it out. But, says the Brisa, the Ein Choifrin, you're not allowed to dig a brand new one. Boiris Sichin Oris Shal Rabin, you're not allowed to dig a brand new pit, cistern, and cave. I guess they used to put water in caves that belonged to the public. The Ein Tzarech Lo Mishal Yachid, that and if certainly not a Yachid. So if it was a private, your person can't just build himself a new pit, a new cistern on Chol Moed. So my love, wouldn't you say that this price is talking about even if Bisharabim Tzrichin, even if it's a necessary project for Yom Tiv, people really need this new cistern, still you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tiv. So this is a direct refutation against Rabbi Yochanan, who said that if Rabim tzrichin lahem, if Rabim need it, afila chafira muta, you're allowed to dig a brand new one if the public need it. And for the Gemara, no, loy, you learned wrong pshat in that brisa. It's talking about b'she'ein Rabim tzrichin lahem, so that the Rabim does not need a brand new cistern, and that's why this brisa says ein choifrim, you're not allowed to dig one. So that must be that if you're going to learn that part of the brisa, then you see the brisa is comparing Yochid to Rabim, that they have the same halachas. So that must be talking about, the brisa is talking about the Kvasi Gabe Yochid. If it was a private individual, She'ein Yochid Tzarech Lehem, he doesn't really need it. He has other water sources. So the brisa says that chatita is permitted, right? Because you're telling me that the first brisa that we're discussing is discussing a case where you have another water source. You don't really need it. So that means if it's a private individual water source, Chatita mi shari. Are you allowed to clean it out? Are you allowed to clean it out? But Tanya, we learned in a brisa, another brisa. This is another brisa, and I color coded it as a brisa number 2. The brisa says, "Boirish shichin uma'arish shel yachid." If it's a private water source for an individual, koitzin mayim l'soicha. You're allowed to hose, bring your hose there and fill it up with water. Avaloi chaytiten. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to clean it out from the twigs and the dirt that's in there, and the stones that got into the cistern. V'lo shafin esid kayen. And you're not allowed to, this is what shafin esid kayen, you see what he's doing in the picture? He is filling up a crack in this water cistern. So you're not allowed to do that. That's already too much. Now, v'lo shafin esid v'shel rabim, but if it belongs to a public, so you're allowed to clear it. V'shafin esid kayen, and you're allowed to smooth away and fill up the cracks. So therefore, and this brisa, whatever it is talking about, it must be talking about a case that you don't really need it. And therefore, it says clearly that if it's a yachid and doesn't really need it, he's not allowed to be chaytitin. So bottom line is, how are we going to resolve these brises to come with a clear din? The Gemara brings a third brisa, and then the Gemara is going to give you the clear halacha so you'll remember it. Velamai, what do you want to say? That when a yachid really needs it, then you're allowed to do only chatita, clearing it out. The kavasi gabe rabim. Then you want to say that the first brisa is also, when it refers to rabim, that if it's a public works, they're only allowed to do cleaning it out. And it's even if b'sharabim tzrichelhem, if the public needs a new one, you're still not allowed to do that. Chafirami also, would you say that you're not allowed to dig a brand new cistern? If the public needs it, there's a brisa that says clearly that you're allowed to dig it out. You're allowed to bring a brand new one. But Tanya, we learned in a brisa, this brisa is very clear. If it's a private individual water source, you're allowed to bring water into it. You're allowed to clean it. You're not allowed to smooth out the cracks, fill in the cracks. You're not allowed to clean out the dirt inside. And you're not allowed to lime it with lime so that it holds the water inside it. You don't have any seepage. So that if it belongs to a yachid, Bishel Rabin, the Brisis is clearly, if it's a public one, you're allowed to dig a brand new one. And not only that, by digging one, you're allowed to lime it with lime so that it's really can hold the water well and you won't have seepage. So here is a clear brisa that says, and probably the rabbin needs it, you're allowed to dig a brand new cistern. So how do you learn the first brisa? How do you learn the first brisa? The first brisa seems to say that ein choifrim, right over here is the first brisa that says you're not allowed to dig a brand new pit for the rabbin. So the Gemara says, Tritz hachi, this is how you answer up the brises. Choytitin boirish shel yachid. You're allowed to clean up a private water source. If this is a private water source that this individual really needs it for Yom Tiv. You don't even have to say that you're allowed to clean out the water source, the cistern, if it belonged to the public. If the public needs it. Because if the public needs it, the brisa, you have to put these words in the brisa. The first brisa, nafila chafira muta, even digging it out is permitted. But you're not allowed to dig a brand new one of a rabbin. If the public doesn't need it, if they're good for now, you're not allowed to build a brand new one on Chol Moed. And you don't even have to tell me that din by a yachid that he can't dig a brand new one. If a yachid doesn't need any service, and he's good where he is, he just can't clean out his water cistern. So let's give it the way to remember it is like this. If you're a private individual and you're good with the water, then you're not allowed to clean out the water cistern, your private water cistern. Just because aesthetically you want to clean it out, you're not allowed to clean it. Because if you're okay drinking from that water cistern, that's extra work for you on Chol Moed, you're not allowed to do that. Okay. Now, if you're a rabbim and the rabbim is okay, has a water source, even if they have a water source and most of the people can drink from that water source, you're still allowed to clean it out, even because it's at the end of the day, it's a public water cistern. So you're allowed to clean it out, even if it's drinkable without cleaning it out. But one more step further. Third step is that if the rabbim needs a new water source, right, because the current ones is not sufficient and would inconvenience the rabbim, you're allowed to dig a brand new one. And that's what these brises say. I have a neighbor who has a pool and he's forever busy cleaning the pool with the net. But that's for aesthetically. You can still swim even if it's a leaf or two in there. But that's what we're talking about over here. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, Masnisa Namedeka. Our Mishnah is also pretty precise. That allows you to dig a brand new one, because the Mishnah says, the Ketani, it says, Oisin kol tzarchei rabim. You're allowed to make and do on Chol Moed anything that's public works. Anything a public need, you're allowed to do on Chol Moed. What is called everything? Latuye, it's coming to include my lav, latuye chavira, that you're allowed to dig a brand new water source. So that's that. Our Mishnah is a good, pretty. You have a nice diak from the Mishnah, from the extra word kol. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what the Mishnah is coming to make additional. It's la'atuye hodatanya. It's coming to add something else. That for a rabbin, you're allowed to do the following things. Yoitzin lekavetz es hadrachim. You're allowed to take away the thorns of the roads. In other words, because it's dangerous. Here's a road right over here, and it's dangerous to walk on this path. So they're allowed to cut the thorns sticking out on the road, because it's dangerous. It can hurt somebody, and he can become injured by it. And what else are you allowed to do? And what else the Brisa says? Could fix up the streets, and the highways. The law made es hamikvois. You're allowed to measure the public mikvahs to see if they have 40 saw. Are kosher. It doesn't have the requisite amount of 40 saw. You're allowed to, make a path so that rainwater could come into this mikvah, because you can't pour water into a mikvah because that's ma'im she'uvim, but you're allowed to, you first pour the water on the floor and then it rolls into the mikvah. So Manayan, and the Brisa continues, if you didn't do all these waterworks, if you didn't do all these things, and somebody gets injured, any blood that's spilled there, if somebody gets injured because you were, didn't take the safety precautions, it's as if you killed them. The Tanya, we learned, you caused the blood to spill. It says that if you don't take safety precautions, like making a makkah, a fence around your roof, if something happens, it's your responsibility. You almost have blood on your hands. So these things are very public works that are permitted to be done on Chol Moed. And that's what the Mishnah is coming to include. Not digging a brand new water cistern. It's just doing things, public works, that's permitted to be done on Chol Moed. So the Gemara says, those ideas that you just brought up, that's another Mishnah. We have another Mishnah that says precisely those things you're allowed to do on Chol Moed. You're allowed to fix the roads, the streets, the mikvahs, and then it adds on, you're allowed to do all public works. So why does it add it on if it already lists you a couple of things that that are tzarchei rabim? So latu yamai, what is the final general rule coming to add? Lav latu yechafira. Shmamina, isn't it coming to add that you're allowed to dig a brand new water source? And Shmamina, that's a direct proof that you're allowed to build for a rabbim a brand new water source on Chol Moed. Then the Mishnah says, Metzayin es hakvaros. You're allowed to mark off grave sites. Why would you want to mark off a grave site? Because people would be carrying truma or taharas, and if they walk over the grave site, the taharas become tameh. The kohen could become tameh, not realizing it. So that you're allowed to mark off grave sites on Chol Moed. Amar Reb Shimon ben Pazi said, Remez l'tzion kavaros min haTorah minayim. Fascinating. What the Gemara wants to say is, where do you find a hint that you're supposed to put? It is very appropriate. We're learning Nishmas, Meir's father. So Remez L'tzion Kvaros Min HaTorah Minayin. How do you know I'm supposed to make a monument, a monument on top of a gravesite Min HaTorah? That could, from the Gemara, the Gemara seems to imply that it's a real din daraisa to put a headstone. How do you know that? So, and that's in the end of the day, it's a machlokes rishonim. But where do you see a hint of that in the Torah? Talmud Bavli, the pasuk says, "V'ra etzem adam uvona etzloit tzion." That it's this pasuk in Yecheskel is talking about during the Armageddon, the Mechem is Gog and Magog, and there'll be bones of humans scattered all over the place. When you're going to clean up after the war, the pasuk says, "Uvona etzloit tzion." You'll put a marker around those fragments of bronze. So we see that there's an inyan in the Tanakh. There is a hint of putting a monument. I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud, I wonder why they didn't bring from the Chumash where it says that Yaakov put a monument over Rachel's caver. Okay, so that's where you see that you're supposed to do it. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina said to Ravashi, okay, so you say it's in Tanakh. Hamakami de Leisi Yecheskel man Amar. Who before Yecheskel, before the Tanakh Yecheskel came out, where did we find a source that you're supposed to put a tzion on top of a kaver, a matzeva? So the Gemara says, according to your reasoning, we find things that in Yecheskel that we did not know in the Chumash, and Yecheskel brought it to our attention. The following halacha, you wouldn't see it in the Torah. You don't see it. But if you learn Medivra Yecheskel ben Buzi lamanu, if you learn Yecheskel, you see a brand new halacha. What is that? Kol ben nechar erel leiv ve'erel basar leyove el migdashi. There's a pasuk that says if you don't have a bris milah, for whatever reason you don't have a bris milah, let's say the brothers got sick and died, and they, as a preventive caution, they didn't give a person a bris milah, he's not allowed to come into the Beis Hamikdash. So that's a halacha that we see in the Navi. Mikami de Leisi Yecheskel man Amar. Before Yecheskel came around, how did you know it was not permitted? Someone who didn't have a bris milah to go into the Beis Hamikdash. Ella, you must say Gemara Gemirla. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It was a tradition that we had from Moshe Sinai, not written down, but Yecheskel put it into a pasuk. So therefore, so that's the halacha by bris milah. You need a bris to go into the Beis Hamikdash. So hachanami, the same idea also. Gemara Gemirla. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that you're supposed to put a matzeva onto a gravesite. V'asa Yecheskel v'asmacha akra. And Yecheskel brought and leaned it on a pasuk. He hinted to it in a pasuk. So it seems from the Gemara that it's at the very least it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai to put a matzeva on a kaver. It's not everybody learns this way, but this is the way from the simple reading of the Gemara. Rabbi Bo says, I have a pasuk in the Chumash that says you're supposed to mark off a grave. The pasuk says, "V'tamei tamei yikroi." You have to call attention to somebody who is a tamei. This is by a Mitzorah. A Mitzorah has to call attention to tell people not to come near him because he is a Mitzorah. Tuma kairala v'imerish loy proish. That the Tuma calls out and calls its attention to itself and says, stay away. Rabbi Uziel said, Tuma kaira loy v'imerish loy proish. The Tuma has to call attention to itself that you have to say separate. So that's another pasuk in the Chumash that says you put a marker to say to people, stay away from here. There's somebody buried underneath. So the Gemara says, this pasuk does it come for this matter? I need it for another reason. Why does a Mitzorah have to tell everybody that he's a Tameh? The Tameh Yikra. Why? Sorich Lahidiyat Sari Larabim. Mitzorah has to notify everybody of his stress, of his sickness. V'rabim avakshin olav rachamim, and many people should seek out and daven on his behalf, because the Mitzorah is somebody who fouled up his mouth, and that's why he became sick, and therefore his tefillas are not going to work as going to be as effective, and therefore in order for him to get rachmei shemayim, he has to mention this to other people, so other people should be mavakish rachamim on him, to ask Hashem to have mercy on him. So if that's the case, I need the Tamei Tamei Yikra to teach me this idea. So the Gemara says, in Kain, lichtlev lachmana, the Torah could write, v'tamei yikra. This tamei should call attention to other people, to pray for him. My v'tamei yikra, it says twice the word tamei, shamet minei tarti. You see two ideas from the pasuk. One idea is that the Mitzorah has to let everybody know to daven for him. And another idea is that you have to put a marker on a grave. Anytime there's something tamei, you have to notify people so they don't walk over it. Abaya says a very simple pasuk. For a blind person, don't put a stumbling block. And what's going to happen is you're going to cause people, if you don't mark a grave, somebody who's going to walk over that grave with truma, he's going to come to eat the truma, and really the truma became tamei, and you're going to cause him to do an avera of eating tamei, of eating truma tameya. Papa says, pasuk says, soilu, pave, parudera, clear the way. So here, again, it's a clear the way, make it a path that people know to go around because somebody's buried here. Take away the michshol, the stumbling block from the roads of my nation. You have to let people know which road is the right road to go on, not the road that has a grave on it. By the way, I want to point out to you, what we're talking about over here, putting a marker, is in case you buried somebody on the road. If you buried somebody in a cemetery where everybody knows it's a cemetery, we're going to learn the Gemara that you don't have to put any marker there because everybody knows this is the cemetery. What we're referring to is if by chance you buried somebody anywhere on a road or any path, you think it's out of the way, but maybe years later they're going to build a road there. So you have the Torah says you have to put, or the Halacha Moshe Sinai says you have to put a marker there. Marzut Drama, the pasuk is V'yizartem es bnei Yisrael metum asam. You have to separate people from becoming tamei. Ravashi Amar Ushmartem es mishmarti asu mishmeres mishmarti. That means you have to make a protection for those that eat truma, that they make sure that the truma should not become tamei. What's the protection? By marking off unmarked graves so that people don't be mitama the truma. Ravina says a nice pasuk. V'sam derech, you put a sign on the road. Arenu b'yesha elikim, I will show you the salvation of God. Sam derech means you mark roads off to show people what's the right road to go on, and that you won't become tamei. So we have about 9 different sources of the idea of putting up a matzeva on a caver. Now the Gemara brought this pasuk, v'sam derech, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, kol hasam archasav, hasham archasav. He makes an appraisal on his ways. He constantly makes what's called in Yiddish and Hebrew a cheshbon hanefesh. He's constantly weighing his actions. Is it worth it? Or I'm going to lose something from it? Is it, I'm going to, the benefit that I have of this Avera, when I think about the punishment that I'm going to have to endure because of it? Or if you lose a mitzvah just because of laziness, what did I really lose? So Hasham Archasav, he's always making appraisal on what's happening in his life. He will merit to see the salvation of himself, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always with that person in a problem. It brings about Yeshua. When you live life carefully and you watch your ways, then you will end up seeing salvation. You're more deliberate in your actions. Shenema v'sam derech al tikru v'sam el v'sham derech. You make a shuma, an estimation, an appraisal on your ways. Areno b'yesh elikim. Then God will show you the salvation of God, which is your own salvation. The Gemara says a person who measured his ways, the Gemara just brings a little story, and you can, I guess that's a nice story. Rabbi Yanai Havalahu Talmide. Rabbi Yanai had this precocious student, the Chol Yoime Hava Makshale. Every day he would ask Rabbi Yanai difficult questions in the middle of the shir. See, in Israel, when they give a shir, I've seen it that the Rosh Hashiva starts and everybody can talk in and ask questions. So this Rabbi Yanai had a Talmud that would ask him questions all the time in the middle of a shir. When the Rabbi Yanai would give his speech prior to Yom Tov, and he was talking to a wider audience, talking about Hilchas Pesach or Hilchas Shabbos or whatever, or Hilchas Yom Tov, the student was silent. because he was afraid that if he asks him a question, the Rabbi Yanni will be embarrassed if he doesn't know the answer, and there's a wider audience over here. We go to Hey Amid Beis. Kara Lights, Rabbi Yanni called on this pasuk v'sam derech arei b'yesh alakim, that he is careful and deliberate on understanding the right time to ask questions. And this was the wrong time to ask the question. So that's how the pasuk applies. The Mishnah Brisa, now we have a little Brisa on Hey Amid Beis, Tanur Rabbanim, Ein Mitzayin, Loyal Kazayas Mameis. If you have a little Kazayas Mameis, that means a little size of an olive of a human flesh, you don't have to make a tzion on it. You don't have to make a monument just to mark, or you don't have to mark that grave. Not a bone the size of a barley, because the bone the size of a barley is not mitama ba'oihel. It's if you just hover over it, it's only tame if you touch it or move it. So we're not concerned about it. If it's such small bone fragment, you don't have to worry about it. Not anything that's not mitama ba'oil. Then you don't have to mark it off. Aval mitzayin, you do have to mark off al hashidra. If you have a spine of a person in fully intact, just the spine bone, that's enough to be mitama ba'oil. That's like the dead body itself. Or if you just have this skull completely intact, that's also, you have to mark it off, that here was buried a skull. Al Roy Binyan, if you have the most of the body, you have, let's say, the two shin bones and one calf, so the most of the height of the body, you have to mark off that gravesite. Or a Roy Binyan, if you have a pile of just most of the bones, even though, let's say it's a baby, right? Or small nafel, right? Preemie. So then if you have most of the bones, even though you don't have most of the height of the kid, so then that would be mitama ba'oil. So then you would have to mark off those grave sites. Shidra, Gegoilis, most of the height, or most of the amount of bones. I guess there's 248 bones or whatever they call it. So there'll be like 125 or something like that. The ein mitzayen al habadois. You don't have to, and this is my point. If you have a known cemetery, you don't have to mark off, because it's a cemetery. Everybody knows it, so you don't have to mark off every grave in a cemetery. People know there's a gate around it. It's a cemetery on it, so you don't have to mark off every grave. Aval mitzayin al hasvekis. If you have an open place and you're not sure if there's somebody buried there, you have to mark that off. The eilu ein hasvekis. What's called something that you're not sure? So we're going to discuss that in a minute. But what is chavais, uprois, ubeisa pras? But these three places where you're not sure there's a dead body in this area, this field, so to speak, you have to mark it off. Okay? Because again, people will think that there is no grave, and therefore you have to mark it off. Maybe a person will come lidei tuma, because maybe there's a chance that there is a dead person there. You don't put a tzion directly. Let's say a person was buried on the road. You don't put the marker right on top of him. Why? Because people don't notice it until they're actually standing on the marker. And by that time, it's too late. So you don't cause a loss for taharis, because he's going to realize too late. The Eimarchi can see him and come to it, but you don't put it too far away from the place of Tumah, because you're putting too much precaution in Eretz Yisrael. That, in other words, you're making the place, let's say 5 feet away from the graves, from where the actual burial spot is. If you push it 5 feet away, so that extra 5 feet, people are not going to walk on that place in Eretz Yisrael, because it's tamei. They'll think it's tamei, but really only the place where you bury the body, that's tamei. But the 5 feet in front of the grave is not tamei. So where should you put it? So you put the marker right, like an inch away, or a half a foot away from where the burial. That gives enough time people to stop, but you're not putting too much precaution, and people are going to stay 10 feet away from that mace. You don't want to hafsid es Eretz Yisrael, cause a loss in Israel, a place where nobody's going to walk. Now the Gemara goes back. We said before in the top of the page, you don't put a grave marker on a kazayis min a mace. If it's an olive from a dead body, you don't put a marker. So the Gemara asks the question, wait a second, why? V'kazayis min hameis ain't matama ba'oil. An olive size of a dead person, of a corpse, is not matama ba'oil. If you have just an olive size of flesh, it is matama ba'oil. Well, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, or Tan, eilu matama ba'oil. These things cause tumah in an oil, in a tent, kazayis min hameis. So therefore, it's tameh. So why wouldn't I mark it? Amar Papa says that the Bryce is talking about hacha bekazayis mitzumtzam askinan. We're talking about a kazayis that's exactly the size of an olive. So let's say you bury that size of an olive, the size of miksa chasa. In a very short period of time, it's going to decompose and become less than an olive, and therefore it's not going to be mitama, somebody walking on top of it. And now, what's going to happen is like this: mutav yisrafu olav truma k'dashim lefi shava yisrafu la'olam. In other words, if you're going to keep that marker over there, it's too small. So let's say in a day or two, the flesh decomposed, and you're still going to have that marker. If somebody's going to walk over that marker, he's going to think that, my truma became tameh. There's a mace under here. And therefore he's going to burn the truma for no reason, because really he doesn't have to burn the truma, because by the time he walked over, the mace decomposed. So therefore, it's rather, don't put any marker there. There's a chance somebody's going to walk past this place today. Okay, he's going to burn, he's going to eat tameh truma without knowing he's eating tameh truma, but that's a one-time mistake. But this mistake of keeping a marker there will cause people to burn truma forever, because they'll always think that underneath here there's a tumas oil, there's something that's matama oil, and they'll continue burning truma there. So that's why a kazayis min hameis, you do not mark that off that place. Even though kazayis min hameis could be matama oil, but if it's exactly a kazayis, it's going to decompose very quickly. Then the Mishnah, and then we'll stop. One more piece. If you have an area that you're not sure if there's a dead body there, you mark it off that there's a possibility of a dead body there. What's the possibility? What is a schachais? A schachais is, imagine a cemetery, and just outside the cemetery, there's a tree. And sometimes they actually would bury people underneath the tree outside a cemetery, because it's a private place. And why wouldn't they go into the cemetery? Because maybe it's Erev Shabbos, or it's getting late, and the workers didn't show up. So they find a place outside the cemetery in a private area, and therefore they'll bury there. So you're not sure if that ever happened, but therefore you mark off that tree that people should avoid that tree. Ilan amesach ala aretz. That's a tree that provides shade over the ground, and it's near a cemetery. That's the point. Pra'os are protrusions of stones. Avarnim pra'os hayotzes min hagoder. Let's see if I have a picture of it. Here's a bone of a mace. So here's a tree outside the, I don't know, bad picture of a cemetery. So maybe somebody buried somebody over here. Or pra'os, let's say the wall of the cemetery. Again, these are protrusions out, so it's like a private place. Maybe they buried somebody underneath there. They couldn't have enough time to get into the cemetery. So you mark those places off. Now, the Brisa says, a besa pras. What is a besa pras? That you don't know if there's a dead body there. What does that mean? Kiditnan. Let's say somebody has a field, and you know for a fact that there was a dead body there. And the Mishnah says, "Hachoirish es hakever." If you plow a field that has a grave in there, hareu oisa beis hapras. That's called a beis hapras. The kamahu oisa meloimana mea ama. For 100 amas in each direction from where the grave was, if someone actually plowed the field, every place 100 amas in each direction become tameh, because we're afraid that your blade of the plow actually brought up the bones of that dead person and spread it all around the field. So wait a second. If you're worried that therefore that is a place you don't know exactly, can't pinpoint exactly where the dead body is because it was plowed over, but his bone fragments could be all over the field. Therefore, you have to mark off a beis hapras. That beis hapras you have to mark off. People shouldn't walk there. So the Gemara asks, what's the problem there? Beis hapras mi metama ba'oil. Is a beis hapras bring tuma on an oil? In other words, there's a way it's not matama, because what are you concerned about? That the bones came up and they got shattered and they're all over the place. A person's allowed to blow. Let's say he's on his way to bring his carbon pesach. Here's the picture. A guy is on his way to bring the carbon pesach, and he has to pass this base of pras, and he's concerned maybe there are bone fragments all over the place. So he keeps looking, blowing, and checking to see he's not stepping on a bone fragment, and we can rely on that. He takes a fan and blows it away, and he can rely on that making his way towards Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yehuda Ba'ami Mishmei De'ula base of pras shenidas tar. If it actually was crushed, if a lot of people went through this base of pras, then it's tar. You don't even have to blow, because even if there was a little bone fragment, it got crushed to less than the size of a barley. So the bottom line is, why do I have to mark off these places? If it's a base of pras, most likely, if you walk through it, you're not going to become tameh, because they're bone fragments. And if there are bone fragments all over the place, you'll see it. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Papa loy kasha. It's not a question. It's not a difficulty. The one that you have to mark off is kan b'sodesh ovid bo kever, a soda that actually you had a grave and you just can't pinpoint where it is. Not that it was plowed up and demolished the grave. The grave is there, but you just can't pinpoint. So if you know that one time many years ago somebody buried in this field, you have to mark it off. But the place that is not tomei oil is besoda shenecharash bo kever. If a field that you plowed up a grave site, that is called also that is where you could actually blow and walk on it, and you don't have to be worried you became tomei. The soda shenecharash bo kever, a soda that you plowed up a grave, besa pras karila, is that called a besa pras? So if it's lost, that means if it was plowed, is that called sheneved bo kever? I'm sorry, this is supposed to be sheneved bo kever. If you lose a kever, is that called a besa pras? Besa pras, the word pras means like prisa, spread out. If it's lost, if you just lost the grave, you can't pinpoint where the grave was, is that called besa pras? So Gemara says, and yes, learn the Mishnayos in Masechta Oilers. But now we learned in the Mishnah, shloisha besa prasein. There's three things called besa pras. Shoda, if you have a field, shenevad bo kever. Soda, a field that you don't know, you lost the marking of where there was a grave here. That's called the besa pras. And in fact, you have to mark off the whole field and tell everybody there was once a grave here. The soda shenechrash bo kever, and there's soda that was plowed a grave. You know exactly where the grave was, but somebody came with a plow machine and plowed up the whole field. So you knew exactly where it was. So that's called a besa pras, the common definition, where you think that all over the ground here is not a full body, but there might be bone fragments the size of a barley. Ustei bochin, a field of boichin. Now, that's what the Mishnayos say. Again, when the Gemara always quotes something in Taharas, the Gemara always, since there's no Gemara in Taharas, the Gemara just explains. A stei bochin is called also a besa pras. So the Gemara finally asks, okay, this is a Mishnah in Oilers, just explain me my stei bochin. What's this field of crying? Bochin means crying. What's a field of crying that you think is a tummy there? So the Gemara says like this: Rav Yeshua bar Abba Amar Mishmei De'ula Amar Soda Shmaftirim Bo Mesim. A soda that they depart dead people. Let's say you have two cities. They carry the dead out of one city because they're burying him near the other city. So they would actually carry the dead to a certain spot, and the other people from the other city would take over and carry the dead body to the cemetery. So that place where they, the changing of the guards, that was called a stei bochin, because people would cry there as they changed the guards and hand it over to the people of the next city who's going to actually bring this dead body to burial. So so the Gemara says, "V'time am I?" Then why would I be concerned that there's a problem at that transfer spot? What's wrong with the transfer spot? They're just transferring a corpse to another group. Amar Avima, very fascinating thing. There's concern that maybe during the travel time from the first city, some limbs became loose. And then when you transferred it over to the next group, a limb fell off and dropped on the floor. And each group thought the other group is going to care for it and bring it to a burial. So the second group didn't pick it up. The first group didn't bring it home. So there's a burial. Might be a dead piece of body in that transfer point. So that transfer point was called a stei bochin, And that's what the Mishnah is called the Besa Pras. You're not sure if there's a kever there or not. A suffix is, you have a doubt, maybe there's a possibility there's somebody buried there. Okay, so that ends this thing. So
Shkoyach.
a mitzvah